Lieutenant Zaxathor scratched his crystalline scales as he stared at the Earth facility before him, the morning sun reflecting off his iridescent exoskeleton in a way that would have been beautiful if anyone had been paying attention, but no one was. His squad of Centaurian Marines was too busy trying not to look terrified at the prospect of training with actual Deathworlders. "By the Seven Moons, why did High Command think this was a good idea?" muttered Sergeant Kylvan, his secondary breathing apparatus wheezing slightly in the Earth's nitrogen-rich atmosphere. The emerald-scaled veteran had fought in 3 interstellar conflicts, but something about humans made his dorsal spines quiver. "Because," Zaxathor replied with what passed for a smile among his species, a slight shimmer of his facial crystals, "if we're going to be part of the Galactic Defense Force, we need to learn to work with all species, even the crazy ones." Their squad's medic, Pexley, was running her 7th diagnostic on her medical kit. Her delicate, almost transparent fingers moved with practiced precision, but Zaxathor could see the nervous energy in her movements. "Did you know," she said, her voice pitched higher than usual, "that humans continue fighting even after losing significant amounts of blood? There are documented cases of them surviving with only 40% of their normal blood volume." "That's not natural," muttered Tikrol, the youngest of their squad. His scales hadn't even fully hardened yet, giving him a somewhat pearly sheen. "Nothing should be able to do that. It's like they're made of spare parts." Zaxathor watched as a human instructor approached their position. The human moved with an easy confidence that seemed almost predatory to his Centaurian sensibilities. Their species had evolved from crystalline-based lifeforms on a low-gravity world, where the most dangerous predator was roughly the size of an Earth-house cat. Humans, by contrast, had evolved running down prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The very thought made his secondary heart skip a beat. "They say humans don't even feel pain properly," Kylvan added, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a whisper, but carried clearly in the Earth's dense atmosphere. "Their nervous systems are so primitive they just ignore it." "That's enough speculation," Zaxathor ordered, his crystals flickering in the command pattern. "We're here to learn, not to gossip like unhatched younglings. Remember your training and show them why Centaurian Marines are considered elite forces." The squad straightened, their crystalline forms catching the sunlight in a prismatic display that would have been intimidating to any species that communicated through light patterns. The human instructor didn't seem to notice. As they were led into the facility, Zaxathor couldn't help but notice the thick walls, reinforced training areas, and what appeared to be impact craters in some of the practice zones. Everything about this place screamed Deathworld, built to withstand forces his species would never naturally encounter. He'd read the briefings, of course. Earth's gravity was 1.1 times the galactic standard. Its atmospheric pressure was nearly twice what most species considered comfortable. Even the background radiation was higher than any civilized world would permit. And humans had evolved here, thrived here, built civilizations here. Maybe High Command wasn't crazy after all. Maybe they were terrifyingly sane. The training ground sprawled before them like a nightmare made real. What the humans called a light obstacle course looked more like a survival gauntlet to Zaxathor's crystalline eyes. Towering walls of synthetic materials stretched 15 meters high, their surfaces deliberately roughened to challenge climbers. Mud pits bubbled ominously beneath razor wire, and the distinct smell of something burning wafted from several smoking craters. "Welcome to Hell's Playground," announced Lieutenant Rodriguez, their human instructor, with the kind of smile that made Tikrol's scales ripple in distress. "Today's joint exercise will test your abilities in adverse conditions. The weather forecast promises rain, which should make things," he paused, clearly enjoying himself, "interesting." Pexley's medical sensors chirped in alarm. "Rain? But our outer layers are sensitive to rapid temperature changes." She quickly began distributing protective films to the squad. Hence the adverse conditions part, came a new voice, accompanied by heavy footsteps that Zaxathor could feel through the ground. The human squad had arrived. They moved like predators, every one of them. Even their casual stance screamed apex species to Zaxathor's instincts. Their squad leader, Staff Sergeant Chen, stood front and center, his dark combat armor bearing scars that told stories of survival that made the Centaurian lieutenant's crystalline structure vibrate with unease. "Four-person teams," Rodriguez continued, gesturing to a holographic display of the course. "Mixed species. This isn't just about completing the course, it's about learning to work together. You'll face automated defense systems, environmental hazards, and tactical challenges that require cooperation. Kylvan's secondary breathing apparatus wheezed louder. Mixed teams, but our biological requirements have all been accounted for, Chen cut in, his voice carrying the kind of authority that brooked no argument. We've modified standard protocols to accommodate your crystalline physiology. No acid rain today. He winked at Pexley, who somehow managed to look nervous despite having no conventional facial features. The teams were assigned with military efficiency. Zaxathor found himself paired with Chen, a human combat engineer named Thompson, and to his relief, Pexley. The other teams were similarly balanced between the species' strengths. The objective, Rodriguez explained, pointing to a flashing marker on the hologram, is to retrieve a secured package from the central bunker. You'll need both human and Centaurian authentication to access it. The catch? His smile widened. The environmental controls in that sector are malfunctioning. Temperatures range from just above freezing to sauna conditions, and they change randomly. Thompson cracked his knuckles, a sound that made every Centaurian present shudder. Sounds like Tuesday, though usually we do this stuff on fire. You do this on fire. Tickrell's voice had risen several octaves. Figure of speech, rookie, Chen assured him, though Zaxathor noticed Thompson's slight smirk, suggested it might not have been entirely metaphorical. The first drops of rain began to fall as the teams took their positions. Zaxathor watched his squad activate their protective films, the transparent layer conforming to their crystalline bodies like a second skin. The humans naturally seemed completely unbothered by the precipitation that could have caused serious damage to an unprotected Centaurian. Remember, Rodriguez called out over the growing patter of raindrops, this is about more than just completing the course. It's about understanding each other's capabilities and limitations. You have 2 hours, and yes, he added, looking directly at the Centaurian teams, the humans really can keep going at full speed for that long. As the starting signal flared against the cloudy sky, Zaxathor caught Chen giving his team an appraising look. Stay close, the human sergeant advised, his voice carrying clearly despite the rain. And try to keep up. Things are about to get interesting. Zaxathor's primary heart sank as he realized that in human military parlance, interesting usually meant potentially lethal to most sapient species. This was going to be a very long day. They were 30 minutes into the course when everything went wrong. The rain had intensified, turning the already treacherous terrain into a slick nightmare of mud and hidden hazards. Their team had made good progress, thanks largely to Chen's seemingly supernatural ability to spot dangers before they became lethal, and Thompson's talent for disarming the more obvious traps. Zaxathor had just finished helping Pexley navigate a particularly nasty section of electrified wire when he heard it, the deep, ominous groan of metal under stress. He turned his crystalline head toward the sound, his sensory matrices picking up vibrations that made his entire structure resonate with alarm. Movement, he shouted, his warning coming a fraction of a second too late. The automated defense turret they'd thought Thompson had disabled burst from its housing, bringing with it a cascade of loosened debris from the rain-soaked wall. Chen, who'd been leading point, reacted with typical human speed, shoving Pexley clear of the falling mass, but physics is physics, even on a Deathworld. The collapsing section caught Chen's right arm between two massive sections of reinforced wall paneling, the sound of crushing metal, and something far worse cutting through the rain. Zaxathor's crystalline structure nearly shattered at the sight. The human's arm was completely trapped, crushed between tons of metal and concrete. Medic, Thompson's voice carried over the rain, but Pexley was already moving, her transparent form practically vibrating with nervous energy as she approached the scene. By the 7 moons, she whispered, her medical scanners whirring frantically. The damage is extensive. The arm is completely compromised below the elbow. Blood loss is... Just get me out, Chen interrupted, his voice strained but impossibly calm. Thompson, that panel's unstable. Another shift and it'll bring down half the wall. Zaxathor watched in horror as Chen looked at his trapped arm, made some rapid mental calculation that the Centaurian couldn't follow, and then did something that would haunt his crystalline dreams for cycles to come. Pexley, Chen said, still in that eerily calm voice, you have a plasma cutter in your medical kit, right? The one for crystalline emergency surgery? The alien medic's form went almost completely transparent with shock. Yes, but You can't possibly. Thompson, Chen continued as if discussing the weather, when I give the word, you and Zaxathor brace that panel. Pexley, you're going to cut my arm off above the crush point. That's insane. Zaxathor's crystals flashed in panic patterns. The pain alone would... The pain's already there, Lieutenant, Chen said, actually managing a grim smile. Might as well make it useful. Besides, these panels are about 30 seconds from a catastrophic collapse, and I'm not having anyone else get hurt because I got careless. Thompson was already moving into position, his face set in grim determination. You sure about this, Sarge? Not my first barbecue, Chen replied, then noticed Pexley's confusion. Human expression. Pexley, I need you to focus, right above the elbow joint, make it clean. The next 45 seconds were a blur of activity that Zaxathor's mind struggled to process. Pexley's plasma cutter hummed to life, its beam calibrated for human tissue instead of its intended crystalline patience. Chen didn't scream. He made a sound that was somehow worse, a controlled grunt of pure effort, as he held himself absolutely still for the procedure. The severed arm fell with the panels as Thompson and Zaxathor caught the main collapse, directing it away from their position. Pexley moved with surprising speed, applying emergency seals and coagulants to the wound even as Chen stayed conscious, barking orders about securing their position. The human cardiovascular system is already compensating, Pexley reported, her voice shaking as she read her medical scanners. Blood pressure stabilizing at 70% normal. Pain indicators are... This can't be right. He's suppressing pain signals that would incapacitate a Centaurian battlemaster. Good, Chen said, and to everyone's shock started to stand, because we still have a mission to complete. You can't be serious, Zaxathor's crystals flashed in disbelief. You've just lost a limb. Lost an arm, not my legs, Chen corrected, accepting Thompson's help to steady himself. Besides, the package still needs retrieving, and I'm not about to fail a training exercise over something this trivial. Trivial? Pexley's voice hit notes Zaxathor didn't think possible for their species. You just performed voluntary emergency amputation in the field. And now we've got a spare hand, Chen said, looking at his newly sealed stump with what appeared to be mild inconvenience. Thompson, grab my arm from the wreckage. Still has the authentication chip we need. Waste not, want not. Zaxathor watched as Thompson, shaking his head but grinning, retrieved his sergeant's severed arm from the debris. The Centaurian lieutenant's primary processing matrix struggled to comprehend how both humans could treat this situation with such casualness. The human saying is walk it off, Chen explained, catching Zaxathor's bewildered look. Though in this case, I guess it's more like stub it off. He actually chuckled at his own joke. That's not funny, Sarge, Thompson said, though he was clearly fighting a smile. Sure it is. Cost me an arm and a leg to come up with it. Well, just an arm so far. Chen checked his tactical display. We've got about an hour left. Pexley, pump me full of whatever you've got that'll keep me moving. We've got a package to retrieve, and I'm not letting a little thing like impromptu amputation get in the way of a perfect record. Watching Staff Sergeant Chen navigate the remaining obstacles of the course was like witnessing the impossible become mundane. Zaxathor's crystalline structure kept cycling through confusion patterns as the human moved with determined efficiency, his body apparently refusing to acknowledge the trauma it had just endured. Your neural readings are extraordinary, Pexley muttered, constantly scanning Chen as they proceeded. By all standard medical protocols, you should be in shock. Your body is registering the injury. The pain signals are clearly being transmitted, but you're just ignoring them. Chen ducked under a low-hanging obstacle, his movements only slightly hampered by the missing limb. Not ignoring, compartmentalizing, old human trick. You put the pain in a box. Deal with it later when you've got time. That's not how pain works, Pexley insisted, her transparent form shimming with agitation. Pain is a critical survival response. It prevents further injury. It demands immediate attention. Thompson, who was carrying Chen's severed arm in a sealed medical container like it was the most normal thing in the world, chuckled. Maybe for most species, humans evolved different. Pain's more like a suggestion. Zaxathor watched as Chen used his remaining arm to haul himself over a barrier. His tactical movements adapted but undiminished. The Centaurian's secondary heart was still struggling to maintain proper rhythm after witnessing the amputation. Yet here was this human, treating the loss of a limb like a minor inconvenience. In Centaurian military doctrine, Zaxathor said carefully, helping Pexley over the same barrier, any injury requiring major medical intervention automatically terminates the exercise. It's considered essential to preserve combat effectiveness through preventative withdrawal. Sounds boring, Chen replied, then held up a hand for silence as they approached the temperature variation zone. Besides, what happens if you're in actual combat? Enemy's not going to call a timeout because someone lost a few bits. The temperature zone lived up to its reputation. Every few meters brought dramatic shifts from near freezing to sweltering heat. Zaxathor watched in amazement as Chen's body simply adapted, sweating or shivering as needed, while never slowing their advance. "This is why we called you Deathworlders," Pexley blurted out, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her professional discretion. "Your species treats survival situations as training opportunities. You deliberately expose yourselves to conditions that would kill most sentient beings." "Makes sense though, doesn't it?" Thompson said, checking their six. "Earth throws everything at you. Might as well learn to handle it. Missing limb? Walk it off. Broken bones? Splint them and keep moving. Bleeding out, that's what clotting factors are for." Chen suddenly stopped, raising his remaining hand in a warning gesture. Ahead of them, the central bunker's entrance was visible through the rain. So were the three other teams, all apparently stuck at various points around the perimeter. "Thermal mines," Chen observed, studying the ground. "Nasty ones, too. Bet they're calibrated to detect both human and Centaurian body signatures. This is where having a spare part comes in handy." Before anyone could stop him, Chen took his severed arm from the container and tossed it in a careful arc over the minefield. The thermal sensors, detecting the residual heat from the preserved limb, triggered in sequence, clearing a path. Zaxathor's crystals flickered through several emotion patterns rapidly. "That's not how we're taught to handle explosives." "Improvise, adapt, overcome," Chen quoted with a grin, another human saying. "Speaking of which, Pexley, how's my blood pressure?" "Stabilized at 65% normal," she reported automatically, then added with increasing distress, "which should be impossible. Your body is manufacturing blood cells at an accelerated rate. Your marrow activity is off the charts, and your endorphin levels—" She trailed off, staring at her readings. "All standard human emergency responses," Chen assured her as they carefully followed the path his thrown arm had cleared. "Body knows it's in trouble, kicks everything into overdrive. We'll probably pay for it later, but for now, it keeps us moving." Zaxathor noticed the other teams watching them with a mixture of horror and fascination. The Centaurian Marines had probably never seen anything like this. A severely injured soldier, not only continuing the mission but using their own severed limb as a tactical tool. "You know what impresses me most about humans?" Pexley said suddenly, her voice taking on the tone of someone making a scientific breakthrough. "It's not the physical resilience, though that's remarkable. It's the psychological adaptation. You don't just survive, you find ways to turn devastating injuries into tactical advantages. You make jokes about trauma that would shatter most species' psyche." "Humor is a coping mechanism," Thompson explained, helping her over the last of the thermal mines. "Plus, you should hear the puns Sarge comes up with when he's on the good painkillers." "I'm already armed with several," Chen deadpanned, then actually laughed at Pexley's shocked expression. "That was another one. Come on, we've got a package to retrieve, and I'm not going to let a little thing, like being disarmed, slow us down." Zaxathor felt his crystalline structure vibrate with what he suddenly realized was respect, rather than fear. He'd started this exercise thinking of humans as dangerously unstable Deathworlders. Now he understood they weren't unstable at all, they were incredibly, impossibly adaptable. As they approached the bunker's entrance, Chen pulled out his authentication chip with his remaining hand and nodded to Zaxathor. "Ready to make history, Lieutenant? First successful joint human-Centaurian retrieval operation under extreme conditions." "I believe," Zaxathor replied, his crystals glowing with newfound confidence, "that you've already made several kinds of history today, Sergeant. Though I'm curious, what would you have done if the arm trick hadn't worked?" "Oh, that's easy," Chen grinned, the expression somehow more terrifying given the circumstances. "Would have used Thompson as a bowling ball. Humans bounce pretty well when you get the angle right." "He's joking," Thompson quickly assured Pexley, who had started frantically scanning him for previous bounce-related injuries. "Probably." The bunker's authentication system hummed to life as Chen and Zaxathor presented their credentials simultaneously. The massive door's locking mechanism disengaged, with a series of heavy clunks that resonated through the rain-soaked air. Inside, the temperature fluctuations were even more extreme, turning the air into a chaotic mix of steam and icy winds. "You know," Thompson commented as they made their way inside, "most people would have at least asked for a break after the whole self-amputation thing." Chen shrugged his remaining shoulder. "Breaks are for coffee and paperwork. Besides, think of the story we're giving our Centaurian friends. They'll be dining out on this one for years." Zaxthor's crystals flickered in what was becoming an expression of resigned amusement. "I doubt anyone would believe us without the medical logs. Speaking of which, Pixley, how is our resident Deathworlder doing?" "His vital signs are—" Pixley paused, recalibrating her sensors for the third time. "Actually improving. The human body is channeling resources to compensate for the trauma. Blood pressure up to 75% normal, new blood vessel growth already initiating, and—" She stopped, staring at her readings in disbelief. "Are you growing new nerve endings?" "Probably," Chen replied casually, scanning the corridor ahead. "Human bodies are pretty good at emergency repairs. Won't get the arm back without some serious medical intervention, but the stub's already prepping for whatever comes next." The package they were meant to retrieve was stored in the center of the bunker, surrounded by a maze of temperature barriers and motion sensors. Each shift from hot to cold zones made Zaxthor's crystalline structure creak alarmingly, while Pexley had to constantly adjust her transparent form to prevent stress fractures. The humans naturally seemed to treat it as a mild inconvenience. "You know what I've realized," Zaxthor said as they navigated another temperature shift. "We've been thinking about humans all wrong. We called you Deathworlders because we thought you were naturally violent, naturally destructive, but that's not it at all, is it?" "Oh," Chen prompted, using his remaining arm to help Pexley through a particularly nasty cold spot. "Do tell." "You're not destructive, you're adaptive. Everything about you, from your biology to your psychology, is built around one core principle. Whatever happens, keep going." Thompson nodded, bringing up the rear. "Pretty much. Earth's not exactly gentle with her kids. You either learn to roll with the punches, or you don't make it." "Roll with the punches," Pexley repeated, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her concern for Chen's condition. "Another metaphor based on voluntary exposure to damage." "Boxing reference," Chen explained, then paused as they reached the final security door. "Speaking of damage, think we could use my spare part one more time? That scanner's going to need both human and Centaurian DNA. "You're suggesting," Zaxthor said slowly, "that we use your severed arm to complete the authentication sequence. Unless you've got a better idea, it's still got viable tissue, and I'd hate to let a perfectly good limb go to waste." The absurdity of the situation hit Zaxthor all at once. Here they were, deep in a training facility, following a human who had voluntarily amputated his own arm less than an hour ago, and now planned to use said arm as a security key. And the strangest part, it made perfect sense. The authentication worked flawlessly. The package, a small, innocuous-looking data crystal, was secured and logged. Mission completed, technically perfect despite what most species would consider a catastrophic injury. As they made their way back through the course, now significantly easier with most of the automated defenses depleted, Zaxthor noticed something remarkable. The other teams, both human and Centaurian, had gathered along their route. Not to assist, they seemed to understand that wouldn't be welcomed, but to witness. "You realize," Pexley said quietly as they approached the exit, "that this changes everything about our understanding of human capabilities. The medical implications alone." "Forget the medical implications," Tickrol called from where he was waiting with his team. "Did you see what he did with the arm? That's not in any tactical manual I've ever read." Chen, who was finally starting to show signs of fatigue but refusing to slow down, managed another grin. "Probably get a revision after this." Chapter 1. Alternative Uses for Detached Limbs in Field Operations. The rain had finally stopped as they crossed the finish line. Lieutenant Rodriguez was waiting for them, his expression an interesting mix of exasperation and pride. "You know, Chen, when we said this exercise was about breaking down barriers between species, this wasn't exactly what we had in mind." "Mission accomplished, though," Chen replied, finally allowing himself to lean slightly on Thompson. "Package retrieved, team intact, and I think our Centaurian friends have a new appreciation for human engineering. We're very modular." Zaxathor stepped forward, his crystals glowing with formal intensity. Sir, I would like to officially note that Staff Sergeant Chen has demonstrated levels of tactical adaptation and resilience that exceed any known military doctrine. His actions today. Save it for the report, Lieutenant, Rodriguez interrupted kindly. Right now I think our resident Deathworlder has earned some quality time with the medical unit. Unless you'd prefer to walk that off too, Sergeant? Might need a hand getting there, Chen admitted, then brightened. Hey, good news though. I've got a spare. Pexley's frustrated groan was nearly drowned out by Thompson's laughter, and the sound of several Centaurian Marines trying very hard not to shatter their crystalline structures with suppressed amusement. As the medical team finally descended on Chen, Zaxathor found himself standing next to Rodriguez, watching the scene unfold. You knew something like this might happen, he accused. That's why you paired us together. Not this exactly, Rodriguez admitted, but we needed you to see humans as we really are. Not as some terrifying Deathworlders, but as people who simply refuse to quit, even if it means leaving pieces of ourselves behind. Mission accomplished indeed, Zaxathor murmured, watching as Chen attempted to fist-bump the medical team with his remaining arm, while Pexley frantically tried to stop him from moving. 3 days later, Zaxathor stood in the medical wing, watching through the observation window as Chen underwent the first fitting for his prosthetic arm. The human was arguing good-naturedly with the medical staff about how soon he could return to active duty, while simultaneously trying to convince Pexley that his vital signs were, in fact, perfectly normal for someone who had recently lost a limb. He's already planning to participate in next week's training rotation, Thompson commented, appearing beside the Centaurian lieutenant. Medical staff says they've never seen anyone heal this fast, though they're a bit concerned about his pun output. Last count was 37 arm-related jokes, Pexley added, her transparent form still showing signs of stress from continuously monitoring Chen's recovery. I believe he's treating it as some form of psychological therapy, though I'm not entirely convinced it's helping anyone else's mental state. The news of their training exercise had spread through both human and Centaurian military channels like wildfire. The official report, co-authored by Zaxathor and Rodriguez, was already being incorporated into joint species training protocols. The incident had even earned a nickname among the troops, the day a human gave an arm and a leg for interspecies cooperation, but just an arm. You know what really gets me? Zaxathor said, watching as Chen demonstrated remarkable dexterity with his new prosthetic limb. He's treating this as a learning opportunity. Yesterday, he was discussing with the engineering team how to improve the thermal mine detection systems based on his hands-on experience. Thompson groaned at the pun. Yeah, that's Chen for you. Give him a problem, he'll find a solution. Take his arm, he'll turn it into a tactical advantage. I heard he's already requested some special modifications for the prosthetic. Something about integrated authentication protocols and improved thermal resistance. Through the window, they watched as Chen successfully completed a complex manipulation test with his new arm, then immediately attempted to fist-bump the medical technician. The poor Centaurian doctor, still not familiar with human customs, stared at the offered fist in confusion while Chen patiently explained the concept. Our training manuals are being completely rewritten, Pexley noted, her scientific enthusiasm evident in her shifting colors. The section on human physiological capabilities has tripled in size. Though I'm still not sure how to classify their pain response, optional seems inappropriately casual. Speaking of manuals, Thompson added with a grin, I heard your squad's been requesting additional joint training sessions. Something about wanting to learn more about human tactical improvisation. Zaxathor's crystals flickered in what was now recognizable as embarrassment. Tikrol may have started a study group on human adaptability strategies. They're particularly interested in what Chen calls thinking outside the box. Inside the medical bay, Chen had finally finished his session and was making his way to the door, his new prosthetic arm moving with increasingly natural precision. As he joined the group, he held up his mechanical hand, wiggling the fingers. Check it out. They even included tactical sensors in the fingertips. Now that's what I call getting armed and dangerous. That's 38, Pexley sighed, updating her record. Chen laughed, then turned more serious. You know, they're already talking about using this as a case study for future joint operations. Something about how crisis situations reveal true capabilities, or something formal like that. It certainly revealed something, Zaxathor agreed, his crystals glowing with warm respect, though perhaps not what anyone expected. As they walked together down the medical wing's corridor, Chen's prosthetic arm glinted under the lights, a symbol not of loss but of adaptation, not of limitation but of possibility. Behind them, a mixed group of human and Centaurian medical students huddled over data from the incident, their differences forgotten in their shared fascination with the sheer impossibility of human resilience. So, Chen said brightly as they reached the exit, anyone up for another training run? I've got some great ideas for one-armed combat techniques I've been dying to try out. The collective groan from both species proved that perhaps they weren't so different after all.